If you know, on our site right now, we have what's new area that gives like a great place for marketing to put things, but that's all like one news feed and it's not contextual. And we find the things that are
Mm.
contextual in the product in that moment where you're making the decision just have so much more engagement. So yeah, I think you have the screen on the one that I'm sharing. Yeah, that's the
All
what's
right.
new section, which is
Yeah, there's no
great.
watching. Right.
Yeah, that gives you like context on what is new.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Behind the Experience, where we give you an inside look behind the top product-led experiences. Each week, you get inspiring UX examples, proven strategies, and hard-earned lessons from experts. This is one of your co-hosts, Ramley John, and I also have my other co-host here, Lila.
Hey everyone, and I'm super excited. Our guest today is Chris, senior product designer. Sorry, today we have Chris, senior product designer at Privy. And Chris, you were not always a product designer at Privy. How you started out as a product manager? What's your journey there?
I did. So I've have an interesting background where I've done design and product through a bunch of different companies in the Boston area. Was started here at Privy about a year ago doing product, and then kind of gravitated back to my roots in design. So kind of full package for Privy, which has been really exciting. But design has been a great role to be able to kind of have a little bit more hands-on approach to some experimentation in the product, and it's just been a great journey. So luckily enough at Privy, I've been the opportunity to be all over product, which has been great.
Love it. Yeah, when you're one of those people like me, and I always say, like, once I get in somewhere, you don't get rid of me. So, you get your tendrils, and it's great. So I imagine in that case, we were chatting a little bit before we started recording that you have purview over a lot of different parts of the product, and you've worked on a lot of things like end to end. But specifically around new users, we could start with that. What does success look like for a new user who signs up for Privy? Is there one activation metric, multiple? Walk us through that.
Yeah, so with Privy, since we want to be an all-in-one marketing solution for small, medium-sized businesses and even larger businesses, there's kind of a lot to unpack there. So we have, email collection with our classic convert and pop-up tools. We have email and we have SMS. So that's basically three different products that you kind of want to onboard almost at the same time. And so it really comes down to really helping that merchant understand, what is their goals, what are their motivations, and then how do we make that really easy for them to find value in Privy, and B, feel like it was just a breeze and almost kind of a magical experience to get up and running and knowing that they can do this. A lot of our merchants, it's not their full-time job to be a marketer, right? They make candles or they make all kinds of awesome things that customers love to buy. And so marketing needs to be something that they can learn and then feel very accomplished with. And then, so for us, like, really, it's all about activation of getting some of those, artifacts live. Can they get that pop up and live? Can they send that first newsletter? Can they send that first broadcast text? And also, can we make that easy? So what things can we put in front of them in order to kind of just make that a no-brainer to get there? So we really measure things like activation rate, which for us is, upgrading to a paid plan, finding that ability to find enough value in Privy that it's worth paying for some of the premium features we offer, as well as getting those things live. So we have a lot of activation metrics around having that first pop-up live, having that first newsletter sent, or having that first broadcast text sent as well.
Now, is there a certain type of group of usage signals that tell you whether or not someone's going to be more likely to convert to paid? So is it a certain type of content that they more sell, or is it like they get excellent, click-through rates, or do you have some really good signals that you tell, oh, this person's getting a ton of value out of Privy and they're about to go cha-ching?
Yeah, so we wish there was like a perfect silver bullet, which was like, oh, if they get exactly 10 signups, they send one email and they log in on a Friday, they're going to pay.
Yeah. Don't we all?
Yes.
The Facebook myth is not true for most of our B2B companies, right? Or B2B2C.
Exactly. And our merchants vary too in kind of their sophistication with the marketing tools they use. We have found that 10 signups within, the first kind of 2 weeks of their trial period is a pretty good indicator that they're finding value because they're growing a list. So that's been one that we've kind of been anchoring on a bit, but it's also the usage. Like, are they engaged with the product? Are they putting in the effort to build a newsletter? And for a lot of our merchants, they need to see some sort of value, right? So either a list growth means that they have a subscriber that they can potentially monetize, or an email they send and they actually get orders and sales. So it really comes down to how do we prove ROI. Anyone that sees some sort of net positive ROI, especially with the kind of a lower entry cost for our plans, means that it's already paying for itself. And that's a lot easier argument to have of, hey, if you're gonna every dollar you give me, I'm gonna give you $2 back in the sale. It's kind of a no-brainer to upgrade.
Absolutely. Yeah. Is there any way that you surface some of that ROI information anywhere in the product?
Yeah, we're trying to do it in a couple different places. So we try to use it as a motivator for one thing, where a lot of those plays that we have, which are basically like recipes of pre-built campaigns for people, kind of showing the benefit of what it means. Like every email you collect is worth potentially $33 in sale on average. We have a vast database of merchants. We've had over, I think, 700,000 merchants use Privy at some time, and so we've collected so much data around how successful certain things are. So not only do we do it as like a motivation for why you should send a newsletter, why you should have a pop-up, but we also have our dashboard, which is constantly giving them updates on where they're at. So, what is your convert revenue? All revenue gained by someone that's signed up through a Privy form. How much revenue have you gotten from email attribution? How much revenue have you gotten from text attribution? To always just kind of bring it back to like, hey, Privy gave you this success, so it's working. I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of merchants is, return on ad spend is a difficult metric. And so also knowing like, am I getting value out of the time, the effort? We know all of our merchants, those are kind of the two biggest things that are constraints for them is time and money. So can we make sure that the time is low and the return is big so that they can actually find value? So through some stats and through some motivation is kind of where we're putting that in the product today.
Super cool.
Love that.
Yeah. And I feel like that's probably a good way to help motivate people to continue using Privy is that, hey, like our best merchants see, I don't know, I'm making up stats right now, $33 per email send. And if you apply best practices and continue using Privy, pop-ups and grow your list and things like that, you can see the same success. Is that something that you're seeing being used in the emails or even in the experience in the copy, so that it kind of pushes or encourages people to continue using different features of Privy?
Yeah, one of the big things for us is education about what good looks like. And I think that's something that we want to continue to put into the product, which is benchmarking, right? Like, what is a good sign-up rate? Is 2% a good sign-up rate, industry average, right? Like, we have plays that can do maybe 10%, spin to win. They might be a little bit harder to configure, but that's the point, is like adding more effort in, just making sure that the ROI is evident, and then having that. So we're trying to intersperse a lot of education. We have our own podcast actually, where our founder goes through a lot of the different things that a lot of small businesses need for marketing. We have an academy, we have masterclass. So it's really trying to help our merchants learn what good looks like, and then show them how easy it is to replicate that success. So yeah, a lot of it is really just trying to get them to understand, it is worth the effort. You should have more than one pop-up. They're different things, right? Exit intent, when someone's about to leave, when they first land there, when they're about to abandon their cart. So you could potentially have 5 different things, and kind of getting past this idea that pop-ups is a dirty word, because it's really not anymore. As long as they're contextual and helpful to a user, they can have a big benefit on your business. So I think it's a matching of education and those real-time results, right? Like if you're going to put it in front of them, have them put in the effort, and then they're actually seeing. We have a lot of merchants that put spin to win, and all of a sudden they're like, I got 400 signups. That's insane. This is the coolest thing ever. That's the feeling we want every merchant to have. So it's really just getting them to understand, that is all achievable with our product.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig into some of these stuff and see it, because we talked a little bit about and saw some screens, and there's some interesting things that you're doing. Like it's a combination of built-in plays. Like I feel like this is what I'm hearing from the top product-led companies, right? Is like templates, benchmarks, plays. Like these are kind of the way to win, and then quick experimentation to prove out like product additions and things like that. Like this is the theme that I've been hearing from top folks lately. So it's pretty cool to see it play out.
Definitely. Yeah, one of our biggest things was onboarding. So we're definitely really focused on how we did that, and that led to one of our first experiments with app queues actually.
Yeah, actually, let's jump into that first one. This is the whole, for people who are tuning in. This is the sign up flow. Essentially, after somebody signs up for the first time, there's some stuff that tell us a little bit more about your business. There's 4 steps. business info, brand info, and your goal in the business info. In the brand info, you ask for the logo, and then the goal shows you exactly, like the goals that you want to achieve. There's 3 options: grow my list, convert sales, send my first email, and then get started. And you, before we started recording, you mentioned that this was one of your labor of love that you worked on as a product manager and as a product designer. Can you talk a little bit about this whole experience and how this has evolved to this?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things was, merchants use marketing for a variety of, goals, especially with a product that's supposed to be an all-in-one, approach. We really narrowed it down to kind of these 3 ideas that we heard a lot. We did a lot of like internal and external interviews to understand, what are our merchants trying to do? What is the playbook that they're trying to run with their marketing? And it really came down to these 3 things, right? They don't want to grow that list, a very, marketable list to have subscribers. They want to convert sales, they want to send emails, or they want to really drive urgency to purchase, right? Which is like, how do I encourage someone that's already landed on my site to just like pull the trigger, buy that thing? And so what we decided to do is, building a new onboarding flow can be a pretty engineering heavy experience. We have a smaller engineering team. So how can we really validate some of these hypotheses we have before, actually jumping into the whole product development cycle? So we turned to app queues for that. So the biggest first thing we wanted to validate was, do these goals actually resonate with merchants? And do they actually tend to go to one or the other? And can we actually measure if that's going to have an impact on activation? Because it's, people could choose a goal, they could go through some branding exercises and everything. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't move the needle, it's not probably going to be worth building for our team. There's probably better things that we can go after. So we built an app queue of a flow, which was basically the first time you landed the product, it was a pop-up and it said, welcome to Privy, what are you here to do? And it gave them the 3 options. We then combined that one modal with a couple different checklists, which was another awesome feature that we found with app queues, which is cool. If they picked one goal, we could always have them revisit one of the other goals in the checklist that flowed with them that said get started. Once they picked one of those goals, we did a series of other flows that launched, which kind of walked them through the steps to build something. So if you picked grow my list, it went through and had you build your first pop-up, right? Kind of walking you through the bare minimum to get started to get the thing live. You can kind of see it here. When you click on that, we're already doing some auto branding here, which is great to really give them a little bit more confidence that like it's already going to look and feel like your website. So you're kind of good to go to launch this and click publish right away.
Super cool.
If you clicked on the drive urgency, it was a free shipping bar, really to encourage like, hey, get to that AOV level in order to, get that purchase. And then the send my first email was really getting them into creating a newsletter. So having those different flows, there's a lot of metrics we wanted to measure. And it was actually a super successful experiment for us. So we were measuring 7-day activation, 30-day activation, as well as a couple other metrics around these individual goals for things like, pop-up actual publishing, newsletter sends, play publishing for the free shipping bar. And it was really great because it was really easy for us to measure too. We had the app queues reporting, which was great. We also were able to pipe this into Heap, which was a tool that we were using for product analytics. So we were able to easily see people that were in the experiment and not in the experiment and how their engagement went. So we could actually see that. We could see people going through it. We also use full story, so we could watch people go through the experience as well and kind of know where they were dropping off. In an experiment, we found over a 30% increase in activation on 7-day and 30-day just by giving them the option of choice for what goal they want to do, because it grounded them in what they wanted to do next. We also saw
Interesting.
It was really crazy. I mean, 30% is just a nuts like number for us to get from something that required no engineering, was just me over a couple days building this together, obviously with a ton of other people's help and figuring out everything we built. But the actual tool building in app queues was so easy to do that you really could just do it in an afternoon and build this whole flow. So it was amazing to see those experiences. We basically validated that hypothesis without having to do any engineering work and felt super confident that if we built a wizard that mimicked that flow and kind of a more intuitive and integrated version, we should hope to see those same gains. And that kind of led to the genesis of this. Obviously, we added in a few more things. We pull brand assets in from Shopify. A lot of people with Shopify connected accounts, that's kind of our biggest merchant base. That way, it's even more seamless. So if you already set that stuff up in Shopify, it comes through. But the goals are the same. The first thing you do is the same. The walkthrough is the same. And so we were also seeing that really come through, and gave us a good onboarding that we put into the product. And we're really happy with it. And our merchants seem to love it.
That's awesome, Chris. And it makes me look bad, because, which I love. I love to be wrong and made to be incorrect. Because I always tell people, don't just do personalization if you don't have anything to follow it up with. But you're saying, actually, we did do that. Like, just the choice alone was enough? Or do you think that you needed those pieces afterwards? Like, did you try them at all before? Like, did you have just the modal up and then add the checklist in later? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for us was really figuring out what was the riskiest assumption that we wanted to test. And for us, like, we didn't need the full thread. We knew people, like, brand settings and pulling them in is like a very nice thing, but it's more of a vitamin than a painkiller, right? Like, it doesn't take too much to put in your color and drop your logo. Everyone kind of has it, but it's nice if it's just done for you. And so really,
a delighter, if you will. I'm trying to bring delighter back. Sorry.
Delighter. Nice. I like that.
Yeah. You remember the product delighters? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead, yes, Chris. Sorry.
We do like to sprinkle delighters all over the product when we can, but those are usually not the riskiest things, right? Now, a lot of people are like, oh my God, that was too delightful. How dare you, right? But if something like, you're making me pick one thing already, I haven't even explored your product yet, like, slow your roll. I don't know what my goal is. And so that was our riskiest assumption, which is like, give them 3 things. Don't give them an option to, like, say, I don't have a goal today. We did have the ability to say, like, skip this. And what we saw is, like, the skip this really didn't get chosen a lot, right? So people picked a goal and they actually did an action reflective of that goal. It guided them down the right path. So people who picked grow list were more likely to publish that first pop-up. They picked send engage my base, they were more likely to send that first newsletter. So we saw that, hey, this choice is okay. This added friction is actually going to be worthwhile for the benefits it gets, especially with the activation rate we saw too. So not only was it giving them an introduction to the product, but it was also giving them an immediate action to take that they could feel confident about, kind of letting them to kick the tires. And that was resulting in people actually upgrading to paid plans, which was great for us.
That's interesting. That's super interesting. And I love hearing that, because, like, a lot of times I've heard the opposite, right? So now I want everyone to go and listen to Chris and not me, and try that
on the business. So for us, right, you have 3 products kind of wrapped into one. So it's really, how does it fit your merchant base and, like, or your user base? And for us, like, there's definitely 3 distinct paths they can go down. Where they get started could be really dependent on how mature their marketing is or how new they are. So I definitely think it does change, but I wouldn't write it off to start. Like, if you're worried about adding too much friction to begin with choices, test it. Use AppQs to test it. Right. That way you can test it with a bunch of people really quickly. So love it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Totally.
In terms of the order of that list, is that like, the most popular, like grow my list, make more sales, and the last one I don't quite remember, but
engagement base.
Engagement. Yeah, is that the order of, like, most popular to least popular out of those top 3?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So we actually, in our app queues, we did a couple different versions where we moved the choices around. They were in the app queues, they were all on one row, so they weren't in vertical order. And then we moved them around to see if it would change. And we found out that over 56% of the time, people chose grow my list. And so that's the one we made at the very top, that we made default, so that you can, like, they are in that order from what we saw from app queues. So that was another thing we got from app queues, was kind of being able to test, like, well, the order we put them in, will it matter? Well, let's put them in the order that we have seen our merchants, gravitate towards.
Super cool.
Love that. That's also something I always harp on people about, is, like, try reordering your options and make sure that, it's not just the easiest thing to click, especially if you're doing, like, a tunnel situation where you want to force people into a thing, which I don't always recommend, but it does depend on your situation. So there's a lot of things, I like that you said too, like, you didn't give them an option to say, like, I don't have a goal. I've been kind of pushing us away from that too. Like, always have a skip, always have an out, but, like, don't add in, like, a equally prominent option, like, no, thank you, because it's like someone might just click that out of a habit, but not realize that they actually, if they read it for a second, that they would rather get directed into a place that made more sense for them.
Exactly. The difference between an intentional friction, right, or an easy opt-out. So as long as the friction has an intentional purpose, I think it's always fine to have people make a choice. It's actually a lot easier for users to make a bunch of small choices. It actually makes tougher choices later easier because they feel like they've accomplished a bunch of things to get to that point. That's kind of the things that we're doing there. You get a little less like wary about pushing a publish button when you've already made a bunch of decisions. And so you feel like, well, I did vet it. I did review it. Okay. I feel a lot more confident being able to click this bigger, scarier button later.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. So what are some things that sort of surprised you about this process? Like that, for me, obviously the fact that you just were able to get some uplift, like with asking the question is super interesting and surprising. But other than my enthusiasm, is there any other things that surprised you during this kind of journey, either with this project or plays or anything else you worked on?
Yeah, I think with this project, it was really interesting just learning about our merchants and their motivations. I think that was one of the biggest things. It was the first time we were able to really validate a lot of internal held assumptions that we've collected from, because you can't talk to every user, right? So the biggest thing about being able to do something like this is testing at scale. So we have these assumptions, we've talked to people, we have onboarding, we have customer success managers, but they only talk to a fraction of our merchant base. So being able to have something like this and say like, all right, we all agree, we think these are the three most important things. Do our merchants agree? And seeing that validation is like super great. And then seeing like, does that actually lead to a demonstrable impact on a bottom line is even more, because like, do people pick goals? Great. But at the end of the day, if they're picking goals and they're not upgrading, like it's like okay to have, it might be a moment of delight, but it's not going to hit the bottom line. So how can we make something that combines both of those? So I think that was the biggest thing for me, is just how easy it is to test some of those assumptions at scale, which was great. But just also seeing the lifts. I mean, just something as so small as just giving a choice, having such an impact positively pretty much down the entire scorecard was amazing, right? Like seeing it apply to things that we haven't even optimized, right? There was still the friction and part of the creating of maybe a pop-up, right? Maybe it's not the most intuitive to add a field here or move that there or change that logic or add a coupon. But even having like a positive impact on that because of something small we did at the beginning was the big surprising thing, because I was expecting all those to stay flat because we weren't doing anything in the AppQ's experiment to make those flows any easier. But they had a positive impact anyway. So that was the most surprising thing for me, is the kind of knock-on or halo effect of the very first thing we asked them.
Very interesting. And this is something I usually dig into a bit earlier, but you mentioned a lot about like finding the bottom line and how does that work? How do you, in working with other people, right? What other teams like did you work with, across this funnel, and how did you find out like that this was successful? Is it, exporting product data, and so like how in the nitty gritty of finding out if something works or not?
Yeah, I think this one was great because it kind of touched every part of the business, right? Like just to figure out our assumptions was a lot of talking with the CSMs and the sales team about what they hear, the onboarding team about, how they get merchants set up for success, right? And even looking at some internal data around like, what are the most successful merchants doing in their first 15 to 30 days. And then there's a huge, cooperative effort with marketing. Marketing does a lot of our pop-ups already, so they have some AppQ's experience in there, and just making sure that we're asking the right people at the right time. We also have an amazing data team and engineering team, which piped in so much stuff into AppQ's that we can leverage. So everything we have in Salesforce is in AppQ's, so targeting can be very specific. We're able to easily run an A/B test on 50% of a certain segment that only had Shopify connected. So we're able to really like whittle down to a very solid experiment that we knew we could measure. That and the ability to pipe it into other tools was huge. So we worked with our data analyst team to not only be able to pull it into Heap, we also were able to export it. We pulled it into Looker. We were able to build dashboards so we could share out with the rest of the team, and everyone could kind of have like access ad hoc whenever they wanted to see how the experiment was running. So it wasn't like relying on like a month later, here's the results of that experiment that you remember that we talked about. You could get daily updates. And so it kind of like built this excitement around it, but like, how's it doing this week? It was at like 30%. Is it still holding? Like, was that an anomaly? Was that because there was a random day in March? Like, was it sunny or cloudy outside? But it's really great to be able to like see that and give access to that. So I think this was one of those experiments that kind of touched every like team and department, and that was great because then you get the buy-in, you get the excitement. And even if we got things that like weren't positive, this one was nice because a lot of it was positive. it gives you an opportunity to like invite questions like, well, why didn't that work? Like, what can we try next? And really like started to get more experiments kind of in the backlog of where do we go from here, which I think is always a great outcome of any experiment you do.
Yeah, and a great segue. You really like to tee me up. Like what are some things that you are going to be working on next that you're excited about?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. One of the new things that we're kind of testing out is the pins that AppQs has. So the really nice thing about these pins is they aren't as intrusive as flows, and they can give a lot more contextual information in our product that traditionally like tooltips would do. The great thing about pins that we like is at Privy, I'm building a design system for us, and so we're really trying to like index on consistent visual design. So we have something that's a new badge component that's being used all over the place to like highlight new features or different types of things or statuses. And so we just released being able to pull in Shopify collections as a filter criteria for email. And one of the things we want to do is like we really want to get feature adoption, but it's kind of buried behind a couple different menus. So we want to put like a new icon with one of our new badges. That requires engineering to build that, host it for a little bit on the app, and then remove it when the feature is no longer new. And we kind of want to put that more in marketing's hands for feature adoption or product marketing than we do in like engineering having to always build a ticket. So we went through the pins. It has the SVG upload, exported one of our badges, the components, uploaded there, and then dropped it right on the settings page of our email creation flow. And it was amazing. It's just like, it looks like it's already built into the app. It looks like a badge anywhere else you can find, has a contextual tooltip. And the best thing is we can take it down whenever we want. Just adding that little badge there got 2x adoption of that feature within the first 3 days that it was live. And so just like things like that are just so exciting for us because it's like, oh, great. We have another avenue to help really get product adoption. If you know, on our site right now, we have what's new area that gives like a great place for marketing to put things, but that's all like one news feed and it's not contextual. And we find the things that are contextual in the product in that moment where you're making the decision just have so much more engagement. So yeah, I think you have the screen on the one that I'm sharing. Yeah, that's the what's new section, which is great.
Watching. Right.
Yeah, that gives you like context on what is new, but they're like articles, right? And so you kind of have to like look at that, and it's not exactly driven by like the page or the action you're on. So
the email, and the screen, this email creation screen that you have here is what you were talking about around. Is essentially like send an email to, and then there's a custom segment, and then there's this little pin that you're talking about, new filters. And then when you hover over, it says new filters added segment by Shopify collections. This is exactly what you were talking about earlier.
Exactly. So this, if you see on here, we have these different statuses. So it's the same kind of label, but the best thing about this is it's using, AppQs here. So you have that same visual identity of like, oh, I understand what that is. It's trying to convey me new information, and I can actually get more information. So it's just been really easy. Again, one of those things that, product marketing saying we're having a little bit of trouble getting a product adoption. Is there anything we can do in the product? And they're thinking of like, we can make an engineering ticket to do a badge. And it was like, well, let's try a pen. Like I think we can do that here. And it's just been great. Like I said, it's another thing that's so surprising. Something so small that takes so little time to build and could be turned off at any time or even tested, A/B tested, just seeing feature adoption by doing something like that is definitely something we're going to start working into all of kind of our product rollouts, is kind of doing this paradigm of how do we introduce new things on different time scales, even to different, personnel or different users and user types, which can be great. So love that. I think some of the more things we're going to look at is using checklists a little bit more. So we have people that upgrade between plans, and we want to be a little bit more prescriptive about here's the next 3 things you should absolutely do, especially for merchants that are upgrading from our starter to our growth plan. They're going from an email and convert tool to an email convert and text, and we really want to help them get their sign-up units converted to collect phone numbers, right, and get all the compliance issues you need to have taken care of there. So how can we encourage them on what to do? With a way that they can access it anytime. So I think checklist is the next thing we're going to kind of go after for solving that. But I think there's so many things. So pins and checklists are definitely on our radar for more feature development.
Super exciting. You're right on the money with like also thinking about, product adoption beyond just the launch. I think that that's a lot of people are starting to realize that as well. Like, okay, we launch something, but then we don't talk about it again in 3 months or 4 months, and the person who did miss the message the first time never sees it again, and then they get on the phone with the CSM in 6 months, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know you had filtering like for," and you're like, so
Exactly.
like we've all been there, and I think like baking that into your launch plan is a genius way to tackle that problem, because I think it often then just kind of gets dusted into the life cycle section for someone else down the line to worry about in a year.
Exactly.
Otherwise, well, where can people find out more about you or what you're working on at Privy online, Chris?
Yeah, Privy.com is always the best place to find all the newest features that we're doing and everything. Also, if anyone ever wants anything, they can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have a really long, interesting French last name, Chris Ladouceur, but that's just where I'm at on LinkedIn. Or I'm just Chris at Privy.com. I somehow snagged that, which is great. So any questions can always be sent to me.
Nice.
But I'm really excited. We're building a design system. I am the senior product designer. I'm also the only designer on Privy, so like I get to own all of it. So,
okay, wow.
That's pretty
if anyone
cool.
ever wants to just talk about how to grow teams, do design, how we implement our design strategy here, always happy to talk. So
love that.
That's
I'm sure you'll be a great resource. And also maybe if they need 3D puzzle advice, is that what I'm spying in the background? Or
these are my ridiculous Lego collection. So I have
Lego. Okay, I couldn't
Nice.
see.
So, yeah,
okay,
we're
so
talking
is it
about
a Lego drawer in the background? Is these like Lego
Oh,
organizing?
those
machine?
that's something different. Those are enamel pens I designed. I do a lot of random creative work on the
Oh,
side.
cool. So you're
Gotta
also
always-
crafty.
Yes,
Oh, it's
gotta
so
keep
cool.
the creative juices always flowing. So
Yeah, well, Chris is busy, so make sure if you email him or contact him that you give him a few days to respond, because he's
Yeah.
clearly a
Exactly.
busy man.
Or if you need Lego tips.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time, Chris. Appreciate it.
No,
Thanks,
thank you. I
Chris.
really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.